per usual, we're just waiting to go live on all our platforms. So give us a minute or two here to we sync up, and then we'll get started. In the meantime, everyone listening wants to put any questions in the chat on LinkedIn. I'll be monitoring that as well. So if you have any questions for our guest today or any topics wants to cover, let us know. We'll try to address it towards within the episode. Okay, the go live button is on, hitting that. Great. Okay, so we're live on all our platforms, so we'll go ahead and get started right now. Welcome back to Coach Connect. Here's where we explore the stories and strategies and insights from trailblazers who are transforming the world of coaching and well-being. What drives their success? What fuels their passions for helping others? We're here to uncover their secrets and share them with you. This show is brought to you by Vibly.io, the all-in-one coaching platform designed to empower coaches with tools, resources, and support they need to thrive and help their clients achieve meaningful, long-lasting growth. I'm Dr. Diego Salinas, your guide on this journey. As a neuroscientist, physician, and health coach, and the co-founder of Vibly, I'm committed to celebrating the incredible work of coaches everywhere and helping them unlock their full potential. So together, let's dive in and deep into what makes coaching a powerful and force of change. Today's guest is Shelby. She's a senior manager coach at the Headspace Training Institute, a national board certified health and wellness coach, and a functional medicine certified health coach. She began her Ginger and Headspace career as a behavioral health coach in 2019 and worked as a senior course facilitator at the Functional Medicine Coaching Academy from 2016 to 2021. Shelby developed and now leads the Headspace Training Institute Mental Health Coach Training Program, which is an approved health and wellness coach training education program by the National Board of Health and Wellness Coaches. She recently completed her master's education in higher education and graduate certifications in social justice education from the University of Massachusetts Amherst. At Headspace, Shelby is also the co-leader of Women Plus ERG and Care Team Non-BIPOC affiliate group, and a small group facilitator for the Purpose Team's Dynamic Learning Pathways, which provides a continuous learning need to build diverse and inclusive organizations. She's also leading a multifaceted project at Headspace as a culmination of her graduate studies that provides re-entry pathways for justice-impacted individuals into careers at Headspace and meditation and mindfulness support for returning citizens. She's passionate about coaching, training people fundamental coaching skills for her career life, mental health and holistic health, dismantling systemic health inequities, and help people self-discover their strength, purpose, and self-worth. Shelby, welcome back to the podcast. Really excited to have you back on today.
Thank you, Diego. It's so great to be with you again. Just love talking with you about all things coaching. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, every time I read your bio, I'm just kind of reminded of all the kind of common values and really excited to explore today some of those. And today's be a little different than last episode. We had different guests mentioning our collaboration we're doing to help people for the LA wildfires. But today we're focusing mostly on you and kind of your coach training. So to get started, we tend to start with a little background. I kind of read it. People like knowing, how did you get started? Where'd your passion in helping others kind of stem from? How did you get involved into coaching and where obviously it led to now? So curious about kind of the origin story, if you will, Shelby, of kind of your path that you've developed for yourself.
Oh, thanks, Diego. Yeah, I love origin stories. I love stories of any kind. In fact, that's really what brought me to coaching as a second career. Just going back to my childhood, starting around, I think, age 11 or so, I had a lot of health issues that were challenging. And so as a young person, I started looking into health and food and environmental factors and things. I was just really curious about how I could feel better. And so I always had this lifelong interest in health and wellness. And I was impacted by a family member who died of cancer when I was probably 13, 14. So I remember saying, I'm going to become a doctor so I can find a cure for cancer. I thought that that's what you did. Like if you were a doctor, I could find this cure for cancer. Anyhow, so I went to school, pre-med biochem, and studied that for 2 years. And then I actually ended up transferring or switching majors to business of all things. But while I really did want to become a doctor in many ways, I also was just fascinated by all these other courses that were offered at the large university that I went to that I really couldn't take because I was taking a lot of, labs and sciences, as you well know. And so, yeah, I wanted to study psychology and sociology, and I love people's stories. And the reason I was attracted to business was because of stories. In my spare time, I would read Forbes and Fortune magazine cover to cover, just
Mm,
enthralled by the in-depth stories of how like an organization would, start and the obstacles it would encounter in its growth and scale and how they would overcome them. And so I just have always, even like going back to the days when we used to have more menus that would have at a restaurant that would have like the story of how the restaurant started on the back.
yeah.
I would love that. I just love people's stories. So I ended up
Mm,
switching to business, got my degree in business, started working in human resources out of college. I think again, I'm kind of drawn to working with people and helping them. Really loved just doing a lot of staffing and development primarily and just yeah, career counseling and things like that. So health coaching came to as a second career. Didn't even know what a health coach was, kind of like you.
like most of us, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I really didn't, but I did have this journey of health healing through what I didn't realize at the time, but was really aspects of functional medicine. Basically, I was always searching for like decades for relief from my chronic illness, and through mindfulness and healing my gut and things like that, I really felt so much better. And I got this email about the Functional Medicine Coaching Academy, and they were just getting started back in 2015 and 2016. And I just took a leap of faith because it married all of my lifelong interests in health and
Mm,
wellness, psychology, and helping people. And I thought, I want to do this. I don't know what a health coach really is, but it just sounds like this is what I need to do. So I took a leap of faith and it was one of the best decisions I ever made. The
mm,
Functional Medicine Coaching Academy, I just want to give a big shout out. Fabulous coaching academy, school. If anyone's interested in becoming a health coach and really learning about holistic health and wellness through a functional medicine lens, that is the program for you. So I learned so much through that program and ended up becoming a course facilitator and working in that capacity for 5 years, which was just so life-giving, working with
mm,
students around the world and helping them on their path to becoming a health coach. And yeah, and then I started working, getting some more coaching experience myself. I started working as a coach at Ginger, which was a wonderful full stack coaching, mental health, therapy, and psychiatry platform, and kind of a startup, and joined them. And then we merged, Ginger and Headspace merged in 2021. So started as a coach, and then I moved into coach training. And yeah, and just I'll leave it at that for now. Yeah, that's kind of how I got into coaching as a second career. I hope that answers your question.
yeah. So yeah, love that term, life giving. Also, I said life
Mhm,
changing, but life giving, right? How much
mhm,
some it kind of reminds me of a topic we'll talk later about for mental health. Some things are active restoration. It doesn't always
mhm.
about it's not something that takes energy will actually give you energy back, actually, right? So it's
Yeah.
really you find it's something that was combined your personal experience, how you want to help people out, took a leap of faith, and it really was this amalgamation of all
Mhm.
these things there. And since then, you've been really into teaching this. So curious as facilitator, what about teaching? You mentioned maybe life giving. What are the things that drew you? Was teaching programs or creating courses something that you've always enjoyed, or is that more so something that came later on as well?
Yeah, it's a great question. Yeah, I did actually work in training and development during my HR time. So, and it actually had this in the back of my mind, all these careers I'd like to do, one of them being a teacher or a kindergarten teacher or any kind of
Mm,
teacher. And then it was really, I actually went to grad school for psychology when I was working in HR, and my studies got interrupted a bit by life and, personal moves and things like that at the time, and had my first child. So I wasn't able to finish my degree in psychology, unfortunately, but I was able to go back to school just a few years ago. Yeah.
mhm,
And really by that point, I had learned so much about psychology and I was almost done with my degree in psychology. So I didn't want to start over as much as I love psychology. I was really drawn to educational leadership and societal change in the
Mm,
last probably 12 years or so of my life, and really wanted to study that and see how, through education, we can have an impact on our communities, local and, national and global. So just really was a dream come true for me to be able to go back to school while working at Headspace and while building the Headspace Mental Health Coach training program. So it was a lot of work, obviously, to build the program and to go to grad school.
yeah.
And I literally infused everything I would learn every day into the program. So yeah, that was really wonderful and I think really beneficial to the program development.
Yeah, they're lucky to have someone who's so caring, but also taking all these new ideas and putting it forward. And so I'm curious, so because you taught for a while at FMCA
Hmm.
before kind of doing this grad school and teaching. Maybe if you
Yeah.
could, maybe it's my personal interest here. What kind of things would you mind sharing that you learned from your master's program education that you think were kind of mindsets just for you as someone that maybe any person who's a teacher or a facilitator
Mhm.
can kind of take away, whether big or small scale? What were some things that maybe were misconceptions you had, or things that were like, oh, I really wish I had known or thought this way of thinking earlier?
That's a great question. Thank you. I think one of the things I learned was really about education being more dialogic. When it is more dialogic and built in an environment of trust and psychological safety to the degree that most degree it can be, that it is just much more effective than just this kind of spoon feeding of like, I'm the teacher, I need to teach you something, I'm going to give you all this knowledge.
Hmm.
Um, really learned that, yeah, we learn best through people's stories and the narrative. And, there's a lot of scholarly like research and theories behind story-based and narrative-based learning and research and how impactful that is for people to share their stories, which is exactly what we do in a coach training program like Headspaces or yeah. So that's one thing I think I've really learned is that we can learn so much from one another and from our stories. And yes, the teacher or the facilitator might have a certain degree of knowledge or um, expert, expertise in a sense, but they're there to learn. We can learn from everyone there because everyone's bringing their own lived experience, which is just adds to the value, and everybody has something to teach each other.
Yeah, there's a lot there I want to unpack there. Let me go from backwards order. Right, my dad would say, we all have different experiences. We all, no matter how much you learn in one category, there's always something you don't know. You can be the world's
Hmm.
best neurosurgeon on some really obscure,
Hmm.
kind of disorder, but you may not know about how to fix a broken ankle. That's
Yeah.
okay,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
And then we got to learn from someone. And you mentioned, there's a quote that's reminded me from Benjamin. I think Benjamin Franklin. It's like, um, "Tell me and I forget, teach me and I may remember, involve me and I'll learn."
Yeah. Yes. Yes. Hmm.
Right. So really
Right.
that's not just this one directional. Kind of also like you had this idea of, okay, I'm gonna be a teacher. Like here's from the classroom, lecture, podium, here's the
Hmm.
data information.
Yeah.
Make sure, tell it back to me. And I can judge you about if it's right or not.
Yeah.
And more saying that when you're teaching something, especially as you get further, I think further along in what you're teaching and the
Hmm.
complexity of the material, where the kind of abstract starts coming up a little more, right? When you're teaching maybe, let's say simple arithmetic, 2 plus 2 is always 4. Not really a
Hmm.
way to get around that. But
Yeah.
we're talking about, how do you hold safe space for someone,
Hmm.
right? These
Right.
bigger kind of
Hmm.
more abstract concepts. It has to
Yeah.
be then internalized and this kind of mindset shift that you're kind of helping someone get to versus
Hmm.
instilling on them.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I think that's where we really have to do as teachers, right? And as coaches, so much inner work to really, reflect on our own lived experiences, our own conditioned beliefs, biases, privileges, and such that in what we're bringing to the learning environment as an instructor or as a
Mhm.
coach, right? So
Yeah.
that we, yeah, just have a wider perspective and can more fully meet is in front of us, where they're at and and just really honor that their lived experience is going to be entirely different. No two people's
Hmm.
stories are ever going to be the same, right?
Yeah.
Just so different. Yeah, so just something that I try to hold on to is just doing that work for myself on a consistent, regular basis so that I can show up as best as I can for my clients.
Yeah. And you mentioned teaching at preschool. I've taught from preschool
Mhm.
to kind of adult learners.
Oh, have
uh,
you? I didn't know that.
actually, after residency, I taught a year preschool, which you learn behavior
Oh,
change really well there. I'll tell you
hmm.
that for anyone
Yeah,
who's
I learned so much from
I recommend
children.
every pediatrician work at preschool for
Hmm.
2 months, and you'll learn a lot there. But to the point, my friends asking what I like about teaching, and it's like, well, you're teaching a 3-year-old or an
Hmm.
85-year-old. It's or I frankly, like you, I don't even call it teaching anymore. I call it help facilitating
Yeah,
because who am I
facilitating.
necessarily
Hmm. Yeah.
instill something on you? But most of it is like understanding where they're at and what could help them get to that next level. It's a two-way
Hmm.
street. You can't
Right.
teach someone unless you understand. Do they, even lecture, looking at feedback on
Hmm.
people's faces. Are they looking confused? Are they looking
Yeah.
interested or
Hmm.
engaged? It's not a. It's a dynamic process that's not it has to have a feedback loop in it as
Hmm.
well. And something you mentioned about psychological safety and trust.
Hmm.
I think that's where we're seeing, hopefully, a change in education development. Because before it was like the head teacher, that kind of you're afraid of, the headmaster, so to
Hmm.
speak. Or um, I definitely saw us. I mentioned this in other episodes in medicine where
Hmm.
there was this. I'm not gonna say here, but when you get asked a question in rounds, if
Hmm.
everyone's in medicine, if you get asked a question in rounds, it's a metaphor analogous to very hard crime. Let's put it this way, right? When you get asked a question in rounds, I just won't say for the sake of this episode.
Hmm.
And I'm like, that's the kind of environment we're talking about with learning. And when
Hmm.
someone is being grilled, when you're a student, and it
Yeah.
becomes feel offensive, you're not going to want to ask more questions and learn. So it really is about
Hmm.
creating a space where someone feels vulnerable enough to say, "Of course, I don't know." Because I say, like, tell my students, learning requires not knowing. It
Right.
requires ignorance to learn something. So I'll start that. We want to learn because we're just trying to fill more information up. But that's a basis of learning is not
Hmm.
knowing. So it shouldn't be the bad thing. It's like that's a
Right.
requirement for learning instead.
Exactly. And being curious, right? Using our strength of curiosity to genuinely want to understand this person that we're talking about, either in rounds or we're talking about in person. Dr. John Cole is our chief medical officer at Headspace and psychiatrist. And when he leads rounds, several times a week, he always opens up when somebody's presenting a case. He asks, "What do you love about this member, this person? What do you love about them?"
Mm.
In fact, we even have bracelets he sent me to remind us that we want to approach, every case, every client, every challenging case that we might be managing with compassion and curiosity. Yeah.
And humanity, it sounds like in there
Humanity, of
too, as
course.
well, right? Like
Absolutely. Yeah. That,
the
mhm,
humanity.
above
Yeah. And you
all
mentioned
else.
there kind of taking care of yourself and showing up. I remember an attending of mine uh, in med school. We had a first week of orientation. Excuse me. And he sat us down. He's looked around the room. He goes, he has a southern accent. He's like, "You guys all have done all these great things, to get here, all these clubs and
Mhm.
activities, this and this. He's like, the reality is you're gonna have very little time for that moving forward. You're gonna do almost none of those things that got you here." He's like, "But please don't lose that one thing that you enjoy, whether it's
That's
playing
great.
music, if it's movies, like seeing your
Mhm.
friends, cooking. You're not gonna have time for those 40 things that you did to get you here. But you have to keep your humanity, because if you
Mhm.
lose your humanity, how can you serve in a humanistic field?"
Mhm. Right. Something
And
that
then,
ties to your soul, right? Something that restores, and especially through something challenging like going through medical school or anything. I mean, our day-to-day lives now, I think, can be really
yeah.
challenging. And one thing I appreciated, I think, in the pandemic, in regard to education, I think helped um, professors and teachers of all kinds to care a little bit more, pay a little bit more attention to the human student in front of them and check in
Mm,
with them. Like you were saying, instead of it being a very authoritarian like relationship, hierarchical, that instead just how are you doing? And being more flexible. If somebody needs time off, if a student is struggling with whatever at home, taking care of maybe their family, maybe their own mental health, their physical health, giving them some slack, right? Giving them
Yeah.
extra time to complete an assignment, things like that. And that's something we do, in our program, our Headspace Mental Health Coach Training Program. We allow students a lot of flexibility for that. I mean, there's definitely requirements that need to be met and things, that they need to do, but we do it in a way that is very human-centered.
Mm.
And that's something I think came out of the pandemic with education that was positive.
Mm, yeah. And you mentioned also the stories we tell ourselves too. I think it ties the humanity back into what we're doing, that we're helping an individual, but also even for memory, right? When you memories, episodic memory helps us remember tie events or
Hmm.
concepts. Where I talked to my coach about this concept, that episode stays in your mind as an anchor
Yeah.
point later on, right? So it really is a helpful tool for also development and growth. And maybe it's a transition there, Shelby. Let's explore more now, kind of um, so you were a teacher, right? You taught FMCA. I think you remember you were one of the first people to the boards as well in 2017. You're part of that first
Hmm.
cohort, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. So
Yes.
kind of trailblazer there. And then Headspace and Ginger said, "Hey, we want you to create a new coach training program from the ground
Hmm.
up." And
Yeah.
anyone who's watching, it's different to become a teacher than create something from scratch, from zero,
Hmm. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So curious if you can kind of walk us through and the Headspace coach training program you mentioned specifically for mental health. I'd love to
Hmm.
know kind of what was the kind of motivation here, and then later on talk about how that training is different. So maybe take us to the early steps of going from ground zero. How did you
Hmm.
start laying this foundation down for creating a program from scratch?
Yeah. Wow. Thank you. Taking me back a few years, since our program launched in 2022, but so it's been going for almost 3 years now. And the whole process did, to really build the program and get it approved by the NBHWC as an approved training program took, I think, at least 18 months, especially because that was not my sole job. So I was working in coach training. We were hiring a lot of new coaches um, every month, and I was responsible for training them, onboarding them. And this project was kind of like, oh, here we have this other little side project for you. We'd like you to build us this program. And I was like, oh, okay, well, and having had um, just the experience I'd had at FMCA as both a student and a facilitator, um, I knew what it took to build a program that would be approved by the NBHWC. It was not something you could just throw together. And I really appreciated the opportunity to build something for Ginger. At the time it was Ginger, had not merged with Headspace yet. So our coach team, our coaches were our amazing coaches at Ginger, coming to us with just really strong mental health backgrounds as therapists, psychologists, counselors, social workers, but many of them did not have certified, coach training. So that was
Hmm.
one of the, first impetuses for developing a program. And we also knew that once we trained our coaches, we could offer this to the public as a way to help just build, future care providers with the highest standards of quality and training, knowing that there's such a shortage of, therapists, psychiatrists, and coaches that specialize in mental health. So yeah, it was a really big project. I was really excited though to build a program that was focused on mental health.
Hmm.
Because what I learned, yeah, as a student myself and through my own health journey and through functional medicine is that our bodies are all connected, right?
Yeah.
Every system interacts with another. And we know that now that the mind and the body are not separate. There's this gut brain axis that's always working and running.
Yeah.
And I just really just I've always been drawn to mental health, just for different reasons. Just within my own family. My son had to take a medical leave of absence, in high school, from his mental health challenges. And it's just something I really have a lot of personal ties to. So,
Yeah.
yeah, so building it was just, yeah, just a big lift. But it was just a privilege to be able to build something from scratch. Obviously, a lot of work, a lot of weekends and late evenings for 18 months, like around I mean,
Wow.
I just poured a lot
Yeah.
into it, but I poured my heart into it. And as I said, I was also at some point, I was also starting grad school, but literally everything I was learning there, because I was studying higher ed and social justice education, I was able to really, yeah, just work right into our program because our values at Ginger and Headspace are to provide the highest quality training and especially culturally responsive care. So helping coaches or whatever clinicians to be able to have cultural humility, to show up,
Mm.
and know themselves well so they can show up and be present for somebody else who may be very different than them.
Yeah, yeah. So you mentioned the kind of mental health and physical health, that connection.
Mhm.
Someone asked me one time, and you said it so nicely. Another perspective I've said before is someone asked me, what's between mental health and physical health? I was on a panel somewhere. And I was like, they're the same thing. I was like,
Mm.
last time I checked, your brain is in the same sack of skin
Yeah,
as every other organ you have. It's one big bag holding all your things
yeah.
together.
Hmm.
If you look at it that way, it's like,
Yeah,
it's all in the same bag.
the same thing. Yeah.
So I'm glad we're talking about this part of the bag now,
Hmm.
but it's
Yeah.
just it's part of it, right? And
Hmm.
and thank you for sharing kind of the stories of those personal stories that brought you to seeing the importance of working on this and how this relates to the bigger the
Hmm.
bigger picture, right? Because ultimately your experience of life and how you view it is such a massive component of your
Hmm.
well-being. And I'm curious if we can dive in a little bit to, so you mentioned a lot of therapists there at Hydrogen Ginger, and therapists, psychiatrists, also coaches.
Hmm.
So a common thing people ask is, what's between therapy and coaching? Something we've
Hmm.
mentioned before. So I'm always curious
Yeah.
to ask, different guests the same question that we all get asked. So how do you approach when someone says, "Hey, Shelby, how would you describe the similarities or differences of therapy and coaching?"
Yeah, such a great question. And I understand why it can be confusing to people, because most people may have never worked with a coach for any reason. And then to think of a mental health coach, like, what is that? Like, when I think of a coach, I think of a sports coach who's, yelling from the sidelines, maybe.
Mm.
Not all coaches do that, but, just being very directive and telling you what to do. And yeah, so the difference between coaching and therapy is that, therapy is very much more focused on the past, right? And helping people process emotions, maybe trauma, maybe difficult situations and diagnoses and making diagnoses. And it's much more of an expert oriented type of care, more directive. And whereas coaching is really helping people to see where they are right now, understand where they want to go and where they want to be, and helping them get from where they are to where they want to be by understanding more about themselves, their strengths. There's so many strengths we each have inside us that I think we don't even realize. And I really love helping people understand their strengths. So coaching is very strengths based, and it's very collaborative, right? So it's not directive. It's not like an expert. A coach doesn't have to be the expert in everything and anything that a client would bring you. We're there to help guide our clients to learn more about themselves and to discover their own solutions to their challenges. And that will lead to more sustainable behavior change. And yeah, I'm just very focused on behavior change theory and how difficult it is, I think, for us as humans to change our behaviors because of the way our brain works. And well, you would know a lot about that. So we can talk about
Yeah,
neuropsych.
well, yeah, yeah, Shelby. So, this, so therapy being kind of more past oriented, kind of untangling some of the things. I've heard the
Mhm.
analogy of, therapy is archaeology, coaching is
Mhm.
architecture,
Oh yeah. Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
And there is this kind of maybe a continuum to as well. To move forward, we want to understand our past, but really coaching is saying, where do we go? The past is just to understand where we are now, and really that forward momentum. And you mentioned the behavior change. So we have understand our emotions, but how are we going to create new behavior patterns there?
Mhm.
And it also would say therapy, also might depend by different culture, different countries too, but besides being that expert role, it's also a diagnostic model.
Right. Hmm.
right? So in therapy, you have to generally diagnose
Yeah.
someone with something to work with them, right? They have to have
Hmm.
anxiety disorder, personality disorder, adjustment disorder, NOS,
Hmm.
not
Hmm.
specified,
Yeah.
kind of
Hmm.
catch-all, right? But it
Yeah.
requires some version of this is the
Hmm.
version of dysfunction, if you will, right? And
Right.
so because of that dysfunction, we know this is a treatment for that dysfunction. We're going to
Hmm.
follow
Hmm.
these kind of protocols, right? Where coaching is diagnosis agnostic,
Right.
right? Or
Hmm.
transdiagnostic model, another perspective, right? It
Hmm.
doesn't, with or without the diagnosis, you still work with someone. It's not, they can have those things and work with them or
Hmm.
not have them and
Yeah.
still use those skill sets that work there
Hmm.
too. So there is a little bit of a, um, maybe it's openness or kind of that for some people, maybe even for, in terms of taboos, kind of bridging the gaps there, right? That you
Hmm.
don't have to have a disorder, or
Yeah.
actually, even better put, you don't need a dysfunction to want to improve. I think is a nice way of saying coaching,
Hmm.
right? You don't
Right.
have to have a panic attack to be more resilient, to work on
Hmm.
stress management. You don't have to go
Right.
through major depression to want to work on your resiliency. It could be
Right.
also kind of preventative, if you will, or
Hmm.
proactive versus reactive.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, I think coaching very much is rooted in, the field of positive psychology for many, and which really is about the art of human flourishing and, what helps people to be resilient, like you said, what helps people who are doing well in life overall in terms of managing all their emotional, mental, physical aspects, what is helping them to flourish and thrive, and what can we learn from that? And yeah, so I think coaching is very much preventative too. I mean, it can be like you said, work with a diagnosis if you're working with a clinician um, or a medical doctor. Yeah, you could work, collaboratively. And people have therapists and coaches, or they have a psychiatrist and a coach, but um, yeah, very much just oriented to helping people thrive and understanding too. I think Dr. Jenna Glover, she is, I'm going to give her a shout out because she is amazing. She's our chief clinical officer at Headspace over all of our coaching, therapy, and psychiatry, our care team. And she talks about coaching and therapy and the difference as mental health coaching. Well, mental health care is not linear. It's, like
Mm,
any, I think often we think of behavior changes, maybe it's going to be linear. We're going to just set a goal and get there, but it's not true, right? There's so many
right, right.
really squirrely and yeah, ups and downs to making a behavior change. But same with our mental health care. Like sometimes we maybe, a breathing exercise will help us manage some anxious thoughts we're having, any particular day. But the next day we might, for some reason, have just a lot of emotions to unpack, and we might need something more, somebody to help guide us a little bit more. So I think mental health coaching, without ever going into the realm of therapy, like you said, that is, focus more on pathology and diagnoses and, the past and processing the past, but we can acknowledge the past and help people to manage their emotions, right? There's so
Mm,
many emotions that we have to manage each and every day. And I don't think most people have been taught that. And just even that you are going to have these many different emotions in any given day, and that we don't need to be afraid of them. We don't need to bury or, try to hide from difficult emotions, especially. And also understand we're not going to always feel elated all the time, too. That's not happiness either. Um,
mm.
yeah, so I think mental health coaching can really help people to, wherever they're at, like day to day, to manage the emotions and whatever they're dealing with in different ways.
There's so much to unpack here. I mean, frankly, mental health coaching be its whole series. Maybe we'll continue on.
Mhm.
So I'm trying to figure out which thread to pull on here. But you mentioned like understanding the emotions and this nonlinear pathway of how it
Mhm.
is, right? And then um, people can feel so excited when they do something one day. They go, "What? Today I'm failing again," right? This kind of like, "Oh, it's happening again," right? And
Mhm.
then acknowledging, you mentioned more education around understanding emotions. I
Mhm.
remember after residency, before doing coach training, I was around Durham, and I took a lot of some workshops they had there, and their therapy program there is based on DBT, dialectical behavioral
Mhm.
therapy. It's
Mhm.
therapy created by this lady named Marshall Linehan, who was borderline and said, traditional therapy is not working for people with borderline.
Mhm.
And borderline, I'm going to over summarize it, simplify it. When you have a lot of emotional reactivity, right? We all have
Mhm.
emotions regulation. That's part of human existence. They have it
Yeah.
more frequently,
Yeah.
right? And so what I learned from there, and they had this like workshops about dealing with emotions through this kind of this lens. And then when I took that and thinking about how I learned from neuroscience, I'm like, those are neuroscience to emotion regulation and processing, and
Mhm.
that we can learn from some of these models that are maybe diagnostic, but the skill set applies for
Right.
everyone,
Exactly.
right? We're
Yeah.
all going to have dysregulation, even when you're super static. It's actually dysregulation, right? It's not the
Right.
normal this kind of part of the bell-shaped curve.
Mhm.
So normalizing that we are going to have at some point anxiety, depression,
Mhm.
ruminating thoughts. It's part of the
Yeah.
human condition
Mhm.
and
Right.
existence versus like what's wrong with me because I feel anxious or depressed. Be
Mhm.
like, yep, it's happening the same way we get runny noses when we get a cold once a year,
Right.
right? Like it's
Yeah.
part of that. And saying, so understanding there's a, for me, maybe it's maybe going to psychology. The intellectualization of it helps you kind of notice patterns and
Mhm.
less self-flagellation of why do I still feel this way? Why do I still
Mhm.
feel this way? And even understanding like primary versus secondary emotions. I look one that all emotions were valid from that program, meaning that an emotion's definition is just that you felt it.
Mhm.
And I'm curious, Shelby, what you think of this example, because this is, I think, is a concept of mental health and talking emotions that really blew my mind. I'm curious your
Mhm.
perspective on this. So um, they were talking about this concept that all emotions are valid, right? And we heard
Mhm.
we're valid, we think of scientific validation. It's right or wrong.
Mm.
You're justified or not,
Mhm.
right? And someone said, what's the definition of an emotion? And to the audience listening, what is an emotion? It's a really hard. I've watched many podcasts on there.
Mhm.
It's a hard one to pin
Yeah.
down what it is an emotion, right? But really, an emotion is something that we're feeling in our body. We're feeling
Mhm.
sensation, right? We probably put words to it, but it's an experience we're having.
Mhm.
And we want to always say, well, um, especially when people are in on conflict, right? It's like you're feeling this, you're feeling that. We're assuming people's emotions,
Mhm.
and the reality is that well, we don't necessarily control our primary emotion. It just kind of happens to us. Here's the metaphor I have. Let's say you're going to your house one day
Mhm.
and you get the key into the door and you start to unlock the door. And as you do, you think you hear something on this of the door, some ruffling or something.
Mhm.
And like, so what, you kind of perk up, fight or flight kicks in,
Mhm.
your eyes dilate, and like you think you hear some whispers. And so now
Mhm.
you're in that fight or flight mode. You're like, I think something behind there, but you're kind of already keys kind of already
Yeah.
turned. So you said fight. You're gonna go
Mhm.
in there, right? Open the door, and you hear
Mhm.
surprise, happy birthday, right? And you're like,
Mhm.
oh my god, you get like, oh, it makes sense why you were being so weird today. Why you're being asking about my when I
Yeah.
come home, like.
Mhm.
But did you actually feel that fear emotion?
Mhm.
You actually felt it.
Yeah.
And so even to say when someone says, hey, you don't, the example they gave in this course was, you don't love me when you leave the kitchen a mess,
Mhm.
right? As a person listening, you go, of course I love you. It's not why I feel this, but
Mhm.
and usually the response is to invalidate their emotional
Mhm.
response. No,
Right, which
no,
is
you had to, versus like we were taught to reflect it back in a way. If you do it, you
Mhm.
actually increase compassion because you understand where they're coming from. Saying, oh wait, I could imagine that if you really felt that I did this in a disrespectful way
Mhm.
and I wasn't considerate
Yeah.
enough to just do the minimal thing for someone that's supposed to care about you, that could be really disheartening.
Mhm.
It could be a
Right.
really sad place to be in, actually. Versus, no, I was busy and I was this, and I'll do it next time when I come back, right? So that's something to me that
Mhm.
really blew my mind. That all emotions are valid. You have to agree with them,
Mhm.
but they're
Right.
valid. Curious your perspective
Yeah.
here, Shelby, or how this comes into maybe
Mhm.
some of the training in mental health. I'm curious if that's something you guys talk about or anything you want to
Yeah.
elaborate there.
Yeah, thank you. No, it's a great analogy metaphor, the surprise party going in the door. Yeah, I totally believe that all emotions are valid. And that's again coming back to just unconditional positive regard for another human, right? And just accepting that their experience is what they're experiencing. We don't have to accept it. Maybe there's something they can also learn about their emotions, and maybe they're not able yet to really articulate a specific emotion, because sometimes we just say I'm stressed or I'm anxious, right, when there's something like those more secondary ones, right? I think that a little deeper, and we want to help people to identify those. And in that case, that you shared, just, helping people to say, I feel this way when the kitchen is not cleaned up, or, really focusing more, those I statements instead of you, right? And not presuming we know something about somebody else's feelings, and definitely not invalidating them, because that's a very dehumanizing thing to do, and really breaks down a relationship. And I'll just say that the thing I love most about coaching and helping people to become coaches is helping them to learn nonviolent communication skills that sadly none of us are really taught, I believe. Unless you happen to be an adult and take, classes in nonviolent communication. It's something I would change if I was ever Secretary of Education. I say I would make sure that children from preschool through high school are learning nonviolent communication, so that by the time they graduate, they know how to have meaningful, respectful, collaborative conversations with other human beings that are very different than them. They can resolve conflict. They don't have to run away from conflict. They can see conflict and disagreement as something that's a natural part of life, but it doesn't have to break us, right? So,
Mm,
yeah, just something
yeah.
I think about.
Gave me goosebumps, me too, because I think of that and like social emotional learning. Why are these things
Hmm.
not taught in
Yeah,
our educational
right.
system when they're such a part of our everyday experience in life? And when I did teach preschool, I taught at a Montessori school, and
Mm-hmm.
I didn't realize till after I did this, but Alexandra Montessori, she was the first female pediatrician in Italy, actually. And she developed the curriculum based off of the kids who were
Right.
basically not neurotypical and were kind of discarded, and saying, and
Mm-hmm.
realized, hey, we all need the same kind of things, learn from each other. And a
Learn
big
from each
part
other.
of her
Yeah.
emphasis
Mm-hmm.
is on the social emotional development of the child.
Mm-hmm.
And there's actually this one concept,
Yeah.
and I'm curious if you can define for the audience a little more nonviolent communication. We'll give you a little example from preschool. They had this thing called the purple rose. But when kids were in arguments, you would sit down at a table, they'd take this purple
Mm-hmm.
rose, and you take turns talking. You can only
Right.
talk when you have the rose, right?
Mm-hmm.
And one day I see these two kids kind of far, and they're kind of, I'm not sure what they're talking about. I see them walk up, go to that table, get the rose. I
Yeah.
just see them exchange back and forth,
Mm-hmm.
and they go and continue playing.
Mm.
And I'm thinking, if we could do that as adults,
Mm-hmm.
right? So maybe you could define for people um, some of those skill sets that kind of mental health coaching maybe focuses on when you're training someone. And actually, let me before, sorry, Shelby, I add one more thing to this question or prompt
Mm-hmm.
maybe. Some of my students will say, "Well, Diego, what if someone cries during session? What if
Mm-hmm.
someone gets?" I'm like, "It's not what if, it's when.
Mm-hmm.
It's gonna happen. If
Yeah.
you're a provider and someone is being vulnerable, eventually it's gonna happen. So we have to learn to be comfortable while they're being uncomfortable or vulnerable. So if you could touch
Mm-hmm.
on this, or maybe nonviolent communication, some of the
Mm-hmm.
skill sets particular to mental health coaching that are more emphasized compared to more general coaching."
Yeah, no, thank you. Well, first to address the crying, yes, people are going to, I think if we're doing coaching well, you know, people will often, not always, of course, but may find themselves in an emotional state, because we're helping to guide people into that inner work, not therapy, not that type of inner work, but just understanding their strengths and what is their vision, like what is their ideal vision for their future, and their values and their purpose. And this can bring up a lot of things that could move somebody to tears, or maybe they're just sharing about something that is difficult. um, I really appreciate, I don't know if you know, do you know Jefferson Fisher? He's a communication
Sounds
kind of
familiar, but
expert
inform
now.
me.
He's a very, very popular influencer now. He's a trial attorney in Texas, and he just his book just launched called The Next Conversation. He's amazing at, as a trial attorney, he learned how, and I think he just has a natural art for human-centered, compassionate communication too. But he helps people just communicate better. And so he talks about crying, and what he says is, if somebody cries who he's with, and this is what I try to help all my clients and students understand too, crying and as a doctor, I'm sure you understand this as well, that crying is just a normal physiological reaction to stress.
Mm.
It's nothing we need to apologize for. So Jefferson Fisher says, you do not need to apologize for crying. Would you apologize because your neck starts hurting or your shoulder starts tensing up because you're responding to stress? No. So I really am on kind of a mission too to normalize um, crying, or just in a sense that we don't need to be afraid of it either. Like we don't have to apologize for it.
Yeah.
That this is I think when we're crying, there's a lot of emotions, right, going on. And we know in our tears, there's like cortisol and all these chemicals, and there's different types of tears. And yeah, so crying is just a normal physiological reaction. And yeah, as coaches, we have to be okay with that and just not allow silence, right? Let people
Yeah.
let the person in front of you know that you're here, you care, but don't try to stop it. They don't need to really just come to an abrupt halt with it or feel shamed for it. And as far as nonviolent communication, I mean, I think the basis of it, well, it starts with active listening, right? Which is foundational to coaching too, which is just to really understand, to listen to understand, not just to hear somebody, right? And when
Mm.
it's hard to do in our world, right? We're just
Yeah.
constantly bombarded with distractions, and we live in a society that's very hierarchical, I believe, and where we're always trying to prove ourselves. It's competitive, right? We want to be talking all the time, showing our worth, trying to prove our worth, and that can just lead to yeah, just a lot of challenges. And I think listening to understand the other person is foundational, and just really, yeah, being able to not speak when somebody else is speaking, and ask yourself, if you're thinking of saying something, does this need to be said by me right
Mm.
now? Does it even need to be said at all? And it doesn't need to be said by me. Um, yeah. And
Wow.
just again, yeah, like I said, some of the using I statements versus you statements, really just tuning in and accepting your own feelings and being able to express them. To be able to express our emotions, right? First of all, to be aware of them.
To understand them is hard
Yeah.
enough, and then to
Yeah.
express them, right?
Mhm.
And then deal with them. 3 steps,
Yeah,
right?
those are really important skills
Yeah.
we all need to develop. And
Yeah.
again, may not have been taught, but I think we're starting to learn, and through coaching. And that's what I love about coach training, because you're learning these nonviolent communication skills that will help you in any realm of your life. Every single, and we have our students, as I'm sure you do with your students, who really, literally in the first week of our program say, this program has changed my life already.
Yeah.
It's helped me to communicate already better with those that I love. And then, of course, take it back to whatever career you're in. You don't ever need to even hang a shingle as a coach if you don't want to. We need more coaches. I encourage people, but I'm happy for anyone just to go through a coaching program to learn how to be a better communicator,
Yeah.
and because it will improve all relationships in your, whatever career you're in, whatever personal relationships you have.
I agree. To me, like coaching should be taught as part of, again, like part of curriculum. The way
Hmm.
you learn how to like do physical
Yeah.
activity, like this way of understanding yourself, seeing the world, understanding others, and communication is so it changed changed most of our lives, right? Who
Hmm.
who experienced it.
Hmm.
And some of the key learnings there. So mentioned crying being physiological response. Like laughter is also, right. We don't apologize for
Hmm.
laughing. And I've
Yeah.
clients sometimes will text me after, hey, sorry for crying today. I go, I'm not going to accept that because you
Yeah.
shouldn't be sorry for
Oh,
this. This is the one time
yeah.
that say I want an apology because there's nothing to be apologized for.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah,
And
absolutely.
yeah, and we see some of the big, sometimes, this name entertainment concept that sometimes your things bottled up, and once you kind of can let it out,
Hmm.
not only catharsis, but you kind of it's a different way of processing it through, like a somatic
Hmm.
processing, right, through these
Yeah.
modalities, and that that silence. We had this impulse to be like, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay,
Hmm.
and recognizing where it's coming from. Is it coming because we're feeling comfortable, they're being comfortable? We want to be the
Hmm.
savior complex. Where is that
Yeah.
coming from? It's okay,
Yeah.
and saying through that nonviolent training, learning and seeing in real life where some of the biggest ahas I've seen transformations in front of me was not from a nice question I asked, the right
Right.
question I did. It's from the silence where I was thinking about what should I ask next,
Mhm.
reflect. And luckily the client beat me to something.
Mhm.
And that taught me early on, always hold space and pause. I even tell my clients, listen, it's going to feel uncomfortable, the silence, because we're not used to it.
Mhm.
But we're doing different things here in order to hopefully achieve different results. And coaching is
Exactly.
like study hall. We're not in a rush to do something, but it's a
Mhm.
time to work and process things, not turning assignments, but it's the working through it that will give us moving forward.
Mhm. Yeah, no, silence is such an amazing skill. And yeah, and I think in our American society, I think I've heard, I don't know if this is still accurate, like, but we're maybe on average used to 2.5 seconds of silence, right? Not very much silence. So when you think about, yeah, just yeah, when you think about mindfulness and just really just holistic health, like we need to be more comfortable just being in our own silence, right? But we have so many distractions today.
Mm,
Really choosing where to focus our attention is a radical act,
yeah,
because it's so hard. We have so many devices and responsibilities and just things happening in our worlds that are competing for our attention just 24/7. And so we don't have, I mean, you think about how much silent time any of us have anymore. Um, yeah, it's something, and yeah, and certainly in coaching, it's such a tool, right? Because
yeah.
we always say wait for eight, right? If we make a
Mm,
reflective statement or we ask somebody a question, a client, wait for eight seconds of silence to allow them time. That's when it's, again, you're helping them to be comfortable with silence, and you're allowing that silence the time for something to maybe bubble up and that courage to speak it. Like you said, things will bubble up sometimes,
yeah.
and then to be able to maybe speak it, and that's where the learning and growth is going to come from.
Yeah, and you mentioned this kind of communication skills you learn in coaching and how people come back saying it's. I remember we have this we exercise. Say, hey, today for your homework, use some
Mhm.
of these skill sets with people that your friends and family.
Mhm. Yeah.
And I remember I was doing it in person. We would do that, and the next day, people share stories. Speaking of crying,
Mhm.
everyone's like, when my teenage son or daughter came home in the car, instead of doing what I normally do, I did this, and I
Mm,
haven't
mhm.
talked to them for this long in a year
Yeah.
or two. And they're like, I had to hold back the crying. I didn't want them to know that I was tearing up
Yeah.
while I was driving because of
Mhm.
how close I felt to them.
Yeah.
Like,
No, that's so
yeah,
true. Yeah, they just help us in our lives because we're not taught. So that's the power
yeah,
of coaching. Yeah, it's
yeah.
beautiful.
And so, Shelby, we definitely will continue to talk this for a much longer time, right? We'll have you back on because this is involved.
Mhm.
This is such a rich field. But one thing that I had misconception of when we first met or early on
Mhm.
was the Heads Coast training program, right? The mental, it's focused on mental
Mhm.
health. So you mentioned like if you're looking for functional medicine, FMCA is a great place to go. But if you're
Mhm.
looking for mental health coaching, it's the area you want to go. There are programs designed specifically for this, right? And
Mhm.
I had erroneously thought that it was only internally for Headspace employees because some
Mhm.
companies have programs that are board approved, but only for their employees,
Right.
right? And I think
Right.
if I understand correctly, Headspace started that way, but then
Mhm.
expanded out
Yeah.
so that anyone can join. So I was like, we should know about this. So
Mhm.
curious, Shelby, if you can explain to more like, when that's happened or how people who don't work at Headspace can
Mhm.
find out about it. Like,
Yeah.
what's a program like? What should they be aware of, or any kind of things you want to tell that audience who now may be aware that Headspace offers coach training for non-Headspace employees.
Yeah, no, thank you. Yeah, it's we did originally develop it, for our coaches. And but then after a year, we did launch it to the public in August of 2023. So for almost 2 years now, it's been open to the public, and it's just very word of mouth. I mean, it's not something that Headspace is doing as, to really be this big revenue generating part of the company. It's not like that at all. It's really just to help ensure that there are well-trained, certified mental health coaches and National Board Health and Wellness, certified coaches to be out there in the world, really being mental health coaches and contributing to the mental health care field. And Headspace now is, we're known as like the mindfulness meditation app, right? And known for that. And now we are a full end-to-end experience of all mental health care, and it's really wonderful to just witness how we're really revolutionizing mental health care and just being a place people can come for any aspect that they need and the tools and the resources. Maybe they just need content. Maybe they need
Mm.
an AI companion. Maybe they need a coach or a therapist or a psychiatrist. We all need a big support team in life. Life is complicated. Life is challenging and it's joyful and it's many things. So, but we do need to have help and support and be able to ask for help. And yes, our program's open to the public. Yeah, and we encourage anyone who's interested in a career in mental health coaching or just interested in learning more about mental health, mindfulness, and coaching skills. Yeah, to check us out. And yeah, it's a very, I think unique. It's a very high touch program. We're very much rooted in the values of Headspace in terms of just caring for humanity and communicating and yeah, being there for each other. And so it's a really close knit community of learners and yeah, staff.
Yeah. And I would say you mentioned values there. I'm going to latch into that word
Mhm.
there. And so I've had the pleasure and honor of knowing you for a while now and working together. And
Mhm.
part of those is our shared values of helping others and spreading the word. So last
Yeah.
week you were on an episode talking about this collaboration, Vibly, Headspace,
Mhm.
Healing Spaces, NYU Langone. And so there's lots
Mhm.
of things you're doing. And kind of one thing we connected on Vibly and Headspace was this shared value. How can we give back? How can we support each other? And we're very honored to have Headspace as one of our partners where we support I was able to talk to your students and amazing
Yeah.
community of
Mhm.
learners, your different facilitators. So I know Noelle, Mary Alice, right?
Mhm.
Wonderful
Yeah.
people. And
Yes.
so this is kind of our goal that Bible is always saying, how can we collaborate with people in the field, right? We want to have
Mhm.
these tools, but for educators, for students, for master coaches, right? So we're
Mhm.
really thrilled to be collaborating and supporting your students, alumni, and any kind of
Yeah.
these projects we talked about, the LA wildfires. I know you have a lot more stuff in the background that hopefully one day we'll continue
Mhm.
to support
Yeah.
in terms of that. So if anyone, so Shelby, where can people find out about the Headspace Coach Training Program if they're interested in learning more about this?
Our website, you can just Google Headspace Training Institute. It's a training institute for both coaching and clinical at Headspace. And yeah, check out our webpage or email me, reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to respond. I manage all of our inquiries about interest in the program, and I'm with our students from before they start through post-graduation. I really, there's just a high degree of, I think, mentorship and support that our program gives. And yeah, I'm happy to talk with anyone about the program or just, what they're thinking about with mental health and themselves.
Yeah, it's wonderful seeing from the kind of education perspective how varied and how much the field is growing in different kind of
Mhm.
specializations or kind of further deeper dives. Right, we all have to know these general skill sets, and also can we continue learning even after our initial training program. Right, this big resource of education. Again, one of the shared values in Vibrant Headspace.
Mhm.
Right, continual
Yeah.
learning and support for those who are serving others. And so, as we wrap up here, I want to say to anyone who is a coach or a coach in training, kind of Vibely's goal is help you in any way along you are. So, if you're in some programs, we have special discounts for alums, but because for our podcast listeners, if you're interested, we have a discount code from now until the weekend, Salinas20. It's my last name,
Mhm.
Salinas, number 20 for additional 20% off the first 3 months of service after your first 30 days free, right? So we really want to build a community like the ones we're continuing to grow with awesome partners and collaborators and really put more, I don't say power to the provider, but more voice to the provider, right? I think coaching is still in
Mhm.
its infancy as a profession. It's come a long way. People like you've been paving the way and been the trailblazers. And I'm so curious to see how it
Mhm.
continues growing and flourishing because people bring, like you mentioned, their own learnings to this. Everyone has different
Mhm.
experience,
Yeah.
different backgrounds. The ideas I have from my clients are different than different coaches I talk to every week. I'm like, I would never thought of that. how
Yeah.
can we continue developing a flourishing of new
Mhm.
and creative solutions that really meet the
Mhm.
needs for those that we serve. So Shelby, thank you so much for coming back here. We just we just glazed the surface, such as
Mhm.
the surface of all we can talk about. So hopefully have you
Yeah.
back on and
I love
continue
that.
collaborating to help students, but also communities that we
Mhm.
can support. So thank you so
Yeah.
much again for your time.
Thank you, Diego. I just want to say thank you to you and for just your human-centeredness approach to your profession of, medicine and coaching and being co-founder of Vibly. Yeah, we have a lot of shared values, as you said, and wanting to help people have access to coach training, to coaching. If you become a coach, then how do you, Vibly makes it so easy to, oh my goodness, to set up, just to have, to put your voice out there, to put like, here I am, I'm a coach, and put your services out in a very affordable, just easy to use experience for both the coach and client. And we're really happy to be partnering with you to just help our students see that it can be easy to get set up, as a coach. And again, appreciate your shared value of wanting to, yeah, help connect people, right? And help people who might not traditionally, historically been able to receive coaching to have access to it through pro bono services and, yeah, just a wider population of coaches. So thank you, and so great to be with you again, Diego. Take
Yeah,
care.
Shelby, great to see you again. We'll see each other in person in July. Can't wait
Yeah,
for that. And actually, I might add one more thing because you mentioned that since people are listening.
yeah.
If you are part of an organization or a small group who can use some free coaching or therapy
Hmm.
support, right?
Yeah.
Luckily, we know a lot of providers in our community who either have
Hmm.
a certain amount of allotment for those services,
Right.
right? And because Bible is
Exactly.
about bringing different kind of coaches together, mental health, functional
Hmm.
medicine,
Yeah.
maternity health, whatever the
Hmm.
category is,
Yeah.
there's someone there for you, right? And so if you are coming from a place of saying, you know what, I could use some support, but right now there are some barriers, come
Hmm.
to Vibely, we'll help you out. If you're an organization, and I say it could
Yeah.
be a small support group at a local library, maybe it's
Hmm.
you and three people meet once a
Right.
month, or the YMCA of your state.
Yeah.
Contact us at Vibely, contact me, Diego at Vibely.io. And so we can help connect you or your communities to those coaches who already are there waiting to give. So
Hmm.
the supply is there.
Yeah.
We just want to connect you. So anyone who could use support, come to us. We love creative solutions. We love creating new things.
Hmm.
Our team is equally passionate with different skill set in terms of the tech
Yeah.
and the marketing side.
Yeah.
So that's, as you can see from my smile right now, it's the biggest thing I love is collaborating, creating new things with people to create new solutions, new systems.
Yeah.
So anyone out there is curious, shoot us a line. Let's see what we come up with together. The same way Shelby and I met and
Hmm.
then collaborated on these projects.
Yeah, no, I
Great.
can, yeah, people will be happy to reach out to you. And again, I'm always here to, I think that's, again, another value we share, just wanting to connect and support
Yeah.
people in their goals. So yeah, thanks again, Diego.
Yeah. Thank you everyone for watching, and we'll see you next week for our next episode. Take care.
Thank you. Bye.